Go. All right, so we're going to look at chapter 21 today, respiratory. And I actually went ahead, I was working yesterday. What did I know wrong? I know I'm going to my office again. Okay, I have questions I haven't typed up, and I swore I put them in the book. Must put them in the wrong book. Well, anyway, they're online. If y'all want to, if I have time to in class, I actually went right off the darn. I typed up, made up the short answer questions. I got 10 for this chapter and run them off. And I think I posted them in Canvas anyway. I think I got them in there. But this is an interesting chapter. One of the problems I got with this book, and I don't have many because I think it's an excellent book, but she actually covered, she does something a little bit different than I would do. She actually takes, normally in A&P, you would have that introduction chapter, the cell chapter, and then the chemistry chapter, which I think was chapter 2. You know, the chemistry, remember you hated that, the 4 organics and all that. Well, after that chapter, almost every other A&P book I've ever used, as a matter of fact, all of them go into an energy chapter. And Ammerman decided to put energy in AP2 after digestion. And her theory was that we break the food down in digestion, we put it in the bloodstream, then the bloodstream carries it to the cell. So then the next chapter is energy and nutrition, vitamins and minerals and all that, you know, explain how they all work in the body. The problem with that is we get to a very important chapter like respiratory, and y'all are like, who cares? You know, you don't understand why it's important. So I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna do an equation here. I'm gonna actually take the pen here, overlay it on this picture if I can. But this is a very important equation that you should know. And that's a 12. That's actually a 12. So C6H12O6, that's sugar, plus 6 oxygens is going to yield 6 carbon dioxides, 6 waters, and 36 to 38 ATPs, which is the energy currency of the cell. Okay? So really to understand this chapter, we really need to cover energy. Now, here's the other side. The one reason I like it being an AP2, I would probably lose 10% of the class on the chemistry chapter because y'all probably slept through high school chemistry or didn't take it. And then we would do the chapter on energy, which is another chapter on chemistry, and that would be like a left hand and a knockout right punch. So people would quit. We might lose 15, 20% of the people in the 3rd week of school, or 4th week of school. You know what I'm saying? Even before we have test 1, maybe, or test 2 in a normal non-COVID year. And so we had a lot of people that made it into AP2 probably wasn't as strong as we would normally have, right? They would just quit. The chemistry would scare them off, or energy. But this is a very important equation. Matter of fact, I went over this one time in major biology about 5, 6 years ago, and this little girl fell in love with this concept. She was going to be a biology major, and she had this tattooed on her leg, which I thought was really cool. So she had it on her thigh. I let her use it on the test, and she had it tattooed on her leg. Okay. And then she came back and took A&P, and now she's a nurse making really good money now. So she came back and then became a nurse. I would probably have the white blood cells strong on my body. I think that'd be cooler, right? Maybe some monocytes and neutrophils and platelets, because they had a lot of, remember, the sister had the red blood, got the red color, right, and had the color. But anyway, she had this put on there. But let me show you why this is so important. We've got to get oxygen in order to capitalize the energy in the sugar molecule. This is a ring structure, and there's power in the bonds, okay? And as we break that down, we release that energy, and we use that to make ATP, which is the energy currency of all living cells on Earth. That conversion, the amount of energy in that sugar, is represented over here with about 38%, maybe 39% of that energy is transferred into ATP. And you're going, Robin, that's inefficient because that's 6% waste, right? Unless you're driving a hybrid car, you're getting way less than that. The average car gets 25% conversion of gas. So you're wasting 75% of your money on heat that goes out and exhaust. So most of our things are not very efficient. And our cellular respiration at 39% would be the equivalent of a Prius. So that's actually very efficient for energy transfer. Okay? We'll talk about that later. But today the chapter is respiratory. And so why am I going starting here? Well, here's what's got to happen. These are lungs I'm drawing. Somebody else said there was something else one time. Those are lungs. We have got to breathe out CO2. We breathe that out. And we've got to take in oxygen. And that oxygen's got to be put into the blood by the cardiovascular system. That is the purpose of this chapter. And to get rid of the CO2 that accumulates in the blood and put it in the air and get rid of it. Thus, this is a very important chapter, right? Because if you don't have oxygen, you live about 8 minutes and die, right? You got to have oxygen. Okay, and you got to get rid of the CO2. Now, one of the craziest things we don't get to cover in this class, and I really like basic biology too, is that photosynthesis is the reverse of this. Plants take carbon dioxide and water, and here comes the sun, my little beetles tribute here, and they build sugar and release oxygen. So photosynthesis is the opposite of cellular respiration. If we go to Mars and terraform Mars, we will take plants with us, right? We've all seen the mission to Mars movie, right? When he had the seeds, but he didn't have any bacteria that germinate the seeds, so he went and dug up the poop that they buried, right? And we had poop, we had bacteria in our colon, and he was able to grow food, right? And live for like 5 years so they could do a rescue mission to get him or whatever. But this is so cool to me. So the purpose of the respiratory system is to do this gas exchange, right? So that we can get oxygen, so that we can do this equation in all of our cells. And it's got multiple steps: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. A lot of cuss words there that we'll talk about in the chapter after nutrition. So we're going to cover that in a couple of weeks. But I think we can't. I don't really want to start this until we what? Look at how this works, right? Because to me that's really cool, right? So the purpose of this is to get the oxygen we need to get our break down sugar and to get rid of the CO2 that we make as we do this. Now let me just tell y'all, there's a biology person. And I'm a religious person, so this would be like, that equation would be like the Ten Commandments to me as a biologist, right? And this is like holy grail of biology, okay? Now, about 6, 7 years ago, I was teaching major biology, and this really broke my heart. This is crazy. Come to find out, we have never measured 36 ATPs being made by a living cell. It would be like us finding 5 more commandments on a broken slate that Moses dropped one of the 3 slates when he came down the hill, right? You know, I have the 10 commandments, right? So this thing I told y'all has never been proven that actually to be true. So it's not that that is the theoretical yield if it worked perfectly, right? But we have actually the most we measured is 30. So a little bit of fun side note. We've been teaching that for like 30, I don't know, 50 years now, and kind of find out where that's probably not that number. So we say theoretical. So because that's theoretically how much we can make, but in reality, we don't make for like 30. Okay? Everybody cool with that? Kind of a cool start to this, right? Very good introduction, right? Okay, now here's my second problem with respiratory system. All right, okay, let me go back to the pen again. All right. What is, and we've already done this chapter, so don't make me look like a fool. What is the main component of blood? Don't make it harder than it is. Water. I heard somebody say water. Very good. Okay, so water. So here we are. Here is Sardis Lake. Here is a boat. Here is Robin. We'll go super fat Robin here in the boat. How much oxygen is in water in a lake? Because we got a problem here. Okay, and here's the problem. Main component of blood is water, right? And we got to carry gases and water. And my question to you this morning to start this lecture off is, how much oxygen do you think is in water? This is really crazy, cool thing. I like to do this lecture real. Then y'all can read the chapter. This will lay some really good groundwork. Okay, has anybody ever had a carbonated beverage? Okay, I'm addicted to Diet Coke. What happens when you shake up a Diet Coke or Dr. Pepper and open the bottle or pop the tap? All hell breaks loose, right? Especially Dr. Pepper, which is super carbonated. Matter of fact, you can hurt yourself. You can flood your car. You can ruin your car, right? With a 2-liter. Anybody ever opened Dr. Pepper after it's been shaking around in the back of a truck in a hot day? It was extremely powerful. I would like soak everybody in this room with one, right? Gases don't like to be in water. So we have got a real problem here, guys. How are we going to carry these gases with blood that don't like gases at all? And we know the answer, right? What is it? I know, Reagan, and I know some of y'all know what is it. Come on, I know y'all know. How do we carry oxygen? We already know this. Red blood cells. Yeah, red blood cells, thank you, are going to carry like 98% of the oxygen, okay? 2% is dissolved gas in the blood. But let me show you a cool one here. The air that Robin's breathing, air, this is very good because we're talking about a chapter on air, is 80% nitrogen, I'm rounding up, and 20% oxygen, okay, for all practical purposes. So that means every 100 molecules that I breathe, 20 of them are what? Oxygen. So when we talk about gases and liquid, we use a concept called parts per million. Okay, so actually the ppms for air part per million is 200,000. That's pretty easy picking, right? Every time I breathe in 1 million particles of air, a fifth of them, 200,000 of them are what? Oxygen. What happens when I breathe water? I drown in 8 minutes. So is everybody with me that the amount of oxygen is less than 200,000, right, in water? Everybody get it? Okay, so I did a project one time before I came over here to work. Last PhD I didn't finish. I started 3 of them. It was in aquatic toxicology, and I had never had a lot of plant classes, okay? And so I got put in charge of this $300,000 or $400,000 project. We got an Ole Miss band, and I spent like a half a year in Alabama collecting water out of Gunnersville and the Tennessee River all the way from Knoxville all the way to Gunnersville, Alabama. And what they were doing is TVA was spraying herbicides in that river and lake to kill the aquatic plants. And our job was to make sure that they were not killing the fish, the clams, and the people drinking the water. There's 24 water treatment plants taking water out of that river, and which is, I mean, it's like a 100-mile stretch. So there's 24 water companies taking water out, and we were drinking that water. So I thought this is pretty cool, right? That the government spends money to make sure we don't kill each other, right? And we showed that none of that herbicides ever showed up in the water. But we also showed that it did kill the fish that I put in cages in the river before they sprayed. And we would watch that for like a week. And then I actually went over there and met some local guys who collect clams. And they're native mussels in in the South that the Japanese like to use to make pearls. So if you don't know this, pearls are when a piece of grit gets caught in the shell, this thing called the mantle. It'd be like you get something stuck, like a piece of peanut stuck in your gum and it hurts. And instead, they get this in their mantle that makes the shell, and they build a spear around it. So a pearl is an irritated mussel, okay, oyster, making a cyst around it. So they take these American shells of American mussels and wrap them in little BBs, and that's what they put in the oyster to make a pearl. And it takes like 5 or 10 years to make a pearl. So they actually make a perfect round mussel shell BB to stick in. Anyway, long story short, we had to measure temperature and all this other stuff, right, to monitor it. Well, we had another instrument that I'm going to talk about here called a DO probe. That's dissolved oxygen. And I read the instructions, and I kept getting these crazy low numbers. So when I came back to my professor, I said, look, everything worked good, and we know we have instruments to check for herbicides, but I think that DO measure is broke because the numbers were just way too low. He looked at it and said, these look normal. You don't know what you're talking about. He made me take 2 water chemistry classes. I took 8 hours because of my running my mouth. If I just handed the log, he never said that. So I'm going to ask y'all, guess what the dissolved oxygen in ppm is in water this morning in Swords Lake? Have a little fun. Y'all guess. So it's lower than 200,000, but it's greater than 0, right? Because we know the fish are living in the water. Fish are able to live off that oxygen, which is kind of cool. So fish, they cool, man. Look, we try to draw a fish here. He's happy as can be, right? Or just tell you, because they can live off of this. So give me a number here. There were no bad numbers, just bad pictures. 60,000. Thank you so much, Ashton. Wrong, too high. Thank you, though. Go lower. 5,000? Go lower.
1,000.
Go lower.
100.
Go lower.
2.
Okay, 2, you kill the fish, they drown. Actually, 2 would be in the summer. You ever been in the lake and see fish come to the top and try to breathe? That's less than 5, right? So normally it's around 5 to 7 ppms. And if you got an aquarium with oxygen tanks bubbling oxygen in, saturation is like 22, 24. So all you can get in water is 22. But on a good day, it's around 5 to 7. Blew my mind. So I had all these readings of 4 and 5, and he's like, you idiot, you don't even know what you're talking about. So I'm in awe of fish right now today because they can live off of what? 5 ppm, and we need 200,000 ppm. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So you already answered it, I think. But so God figured this out. He made red blood cells to what? Carry the oxygen, right? Because oxygen doesn't like to mix in gases. Now, CO2 is another game. I'm going to show you that in a minute. I'm going to try to get to that. That's what I'm going to try to get to. Where I'm going to at least answer that question in the next 20 minutes. How we carry CO2 is really cool also. It is. It's very good. She's read her chapter. I'm going to cry. Okay, don't make me cry this morning. Okay, I'm very emotional. I can cry tonight. Okay, but yes, CO2 is like 20, 23 times more soluble, right? Carbon dioxide than oxygen. So it can carry more. Very good, okay? So we're gonna I'll get to that. So I'm gonna go to the slide. Is this not kind of cool? We can put it in a reference point, right? Okay, I think it's kind of cool. And when we're all forward here, let me just tell you something kind of cool. I don't have time to Google this, but back in the 80s or 90s, they discovered a liquid that they could get more than 20% oxygen in it. And the Navy SEALs and divers use this to do deep sea diving. And once you get so far down, all the pressure of that water makes it hard to breathe. It's easier to breathe water in your lungs than air. So these people are put on a space suit, and they fill up the suit with this liquid, and they breathe the liquid, have to choke themselves and breathe the liquids. They quit using it because it would throw some people in anaphylactic shock, they freak out. The concept of drowning does not make you feel good. You can have a heart attack by drowning yourself, right? It's the fear of breathing that water. Now remember, you breathe water for like 7 months in mother's womb. It didn't hurt you because you just hooked your mother's placenta, right, to get oxygen through the placenta, through the umbilical cord, right? But these divers used it, so it was better to breathe this liquid than air in deep diving. But they quit using it because it was other issues. I saw a guy had a tank of this doing this lecture, and he had a rat in there just walking around the bottom of the aquarium breathing that liquid. Which is weird. Okay, imagine me having a rat up here walking around in a 50-gallon aquarium, just walking around the bottom of that. That's weird, right? So there is a liquid you can breathe. So when we get sick and are drowned, it ain't the oxygen that kills us, it's the lack, it's not the water that kills you, it's the lack of oxygen in the water. But that also can lead to pneumonia and all kinds of things, right? When you get water in your lungs. So that's not a good idea for us to do that once we get when we get back to reality here. Okay, so where the organs found, we know blood vessels, pulmonary circuit, right side of the heart carries the blood to the oxygen, right? And here are all the parts of it. So we got the nose, pharynx, larynx. These are just the windpipes, right? The trachea coming down, going into the lungs. The trachea has a cartilage ring to keep it from collapsing, right? So that you won't close it down. So have you ever done that on a straw, something too hard and it's stuck together? If it's a real cheap straw, especially little kids, because you'll bite it and it sucks it down, you turn blue sucking on it. Okay, God knew that would be bad. That happened at midnight tonight when you're sleeping, you die. So he put that cartilage ring to keep it open. Okay, and then it's going to branch down into hundreds of little tubes down to these little terminal bronchioli that have these little alveoli. And to me, that looks like a cluster of grapes. Each of those alveoli has a capillary bed around it, and that's where we do the gas exchange. So that is where we actually get the oxygen in and get rid of CO2. And let me just go ahead and tell you right now, guess what's killing people with COVID? COVID interferes with that membrane so that they make so much mucus, they can't get the gas exchange to occur. And we found very early on, about a year ago, that people, once you get all worked up and get inflammation down there, giving them the steroid packs, which are like $12, $13, actually stops your immune system from attacking it and stops you making mucus. And that was one of the first big treatments we discovered, was to get, like, how many of y'all have ever had poison oak? I got it bad. I am allergic. I mean, my body doesn't find it very well. But have you ever had to take the pills where you take like 8 one day, 6 the next day, 4 the next day? That's a steroid pack, and you're just knocking your immune system out. And that lets your skin clear out. So you're just knocking out your immune system. Well, that is what we're giving people with COVID, and that stops the mucus from building up and them attacking this membrane. And what's really weird, I'm going to say it here because this is so weird to me, but when this thing first broke a year ago, my first thing my doctor told me, he said, this whole thing we argued for 6 months about ventilators. Ventilators help you breathe. They help the air get down to the sac. It does not force it across the membrane. Ventilators are not going to help somebody with COVID. What we need is hyperbaric chambers. And there's like 2 in the city. And that's where you get put into, like when you go deep sea diving, you come up too fast and you get bubbles in your oxygen, they put you under pressure like a pressure cooker, and that forces the gases in and out. So I'm sure, somebody, Bill Gates' mom, when got COVID, had a hyperbaric chamber that they put her in, probably so she's okay. But we don't have enough of them, and they're very expensive to make. So we didn't even tell the public. Nobody even tried to make it. So when they put them on that ventilator, they were so bad we needed to help them breathe because they wouldn't even breathe them right, but they still weren't getting this exchange at the alveoli. So very, very, very practical one here since we're still dealing with that. So the alveoli at the end is where the gas exchange occurs in the lungs, right? Everything above the trachea is called upper respiratory, and everything kind of below the trachea and down is lower respiratory. So you can have an upper respiratory infection, lower respiratory infection. The respiratory zone is only the alveoli where gas exchange can occur. So only at the alveoli do we get the gas exchange. okay? And so look at the things we got to do. So for respiration to occur, we got to have pulmonary ventilation. We got to breathe the air into the alveoli. That's what the ventilator helps. Then we got to have the gas exchange here. So oxygen leaves the blood, air goes into the blood, CO2 leaves the blood, goes in the air. Very important exchange there. I got a question on my review sheet. Describe the exchange there. Give me the pressures involved. I'll show them to you in just a minute. Okay? And I'm sorry, I just didn't want to run back and get those real quick because they're online. Y'all can print it off later or follow me to my office. I'll run and get y'all one. Sorry. I came in this morning and printed them off. I thought I stuck them in the wrong book. Then we got to carry the gases. They got to be transported in the blood to the tissues. Then you got to do what? A tissue exchange, right down the big toe. You got to have the oxygen leave the blood, go in the big toe, CO2 leave the big toe, go in the blood. So it's pretty elaborate, right? Then you do cell respiration to live. That I drew earlier, so that's when we need oxygen. So I got a question there. Why do we need oxygen? Why do we need to breathe? We have to have oxygen in order to do cellular respiration at the cellular level, right? That equation. And we have to get rid of CO2. So breathing solves two problems, right? It gets oxygen in the blood carries it to the cells, and then we get rid of the CO2, which is the waste gas we produce as we burn sugar and make energy. Now, somebody right now is going, Robin, what about fats and proteins? Well, we convert them into sugar, okay? So we can convert them into the building blocks that can go into that pathway. So we have one pathway of life on Earth, the humans. We eat protein, sugars, and fats, and we throw them into glycolysis, Krebs, electron transport chain, and we make ATP. We're going to cover that in another chapter later. But another good slide here, right? So what are the four things going to happen? Breathe in, gas exchange the alveoli, carry it, transport the gas to the cells, get the oxygen in the cell, get rid of CO2, and then do the reverse, carry it back to the lungs to be chunked out. Very, very, very cool. Okay. And then side notes, we use this for speech. So we blow hot air over a vocal cord. I've made a pretty good career out of running my mouth, right? About 30 years. I've been doing this 30 years here, and about five or six at OMED. So we blow our air over, we'll look at that over vocal cords, and we're able to make notes. And by putting tension on the vocal cords, we can make different notes. And by how much hot air we blow over, lots of hot air, loud, little air, no. Volume is achieved that way. And of course, we have to use our mouth to form some of the sounds. And then in the upper respiratory and the nose, we have the sense of smell, right? Which, by the way, was the first one that people noticed missing, right? The COVID, right? It knocks out smell and taste. I got a friend that's had it 6 months now, post-COVID. She's fine. Still can't taste nothing. That'd be pretty bad, right? Maybe I need that to kickstart my diet, right? That part of it. Okay, and then of course it also helps with breathing. So I mean, so actually when we breathe, we actually pump blood back to the heart. So it's involved in assisting and defecating. That's a number 2. A scientific name for number 2. Okay, and urination and childbirth is using this also, that pressure. We also control the pH of the blood by increasing and decreasing breathing. We'll look at that later. And here's one that kind of hit me during Christmas. We synthesize an enzyme called angiotensin that has to go to the lung to be converted into angiotensin 2. And that is the major cause of high blood pressure in America. So if you have hereditary high blood pressure, which I do, you make too much of this angiotensin 2 and it goes to your smooth muscle and your arteries and squeezes down and makes you have high blood pressure. And so I actually have been taking a angiotensin 2 blocker that blocks the receptor it binds to, and my blood pressure went from 150 over 100 to 110 over 60 overnight. I am falling asleep a little earlier at 11 o'clock. So I normally would stay up to 1 o'clock. So I do think it's making me get a little sleepier, but still, that's crazy. And that seems to be the main cause of hereditary high blood pressure. So a lot of stuff going on here to me with the respiratory system. Okay. So we'll go through one more time real quick. The anatomy. What is the purpose of the nose? All those blood vessels in your nose is to warm the air and put some moisture in it and also filter it. So we make boogers in our nose, right? The mucus collects boogers, and that's debris that we pick out or blow out of our nose. Okay. And then of course we got smell and resonance for voice also. Okay. Going on here. Here we go. We got a fancy name for the nostrils, right? Pretty cool. Nothing much here. Anybody has sinus surgery, right? Look at all the sinus cavities in here. So we have lots of room for bacterial infections, fungal. People have fungal infections in their sinuses that are kind of scary, right? And there's smell, and we got the folds here. So as that air comes in, this is where we get sinus infections a lot of times up here too, right? if you get too much in here. Is anybody used one of the little, what do you call it? Chinese call it a nifty pot. Really cool idea here. If you want to use sterilized water, okay, please. I'm telling you, I've had people swear by it. You can even buy a little squeegee bottle like you put the windshield with, but you blow it up in your nose. They've got one I saw. I'm looking about this one for $100. But you hook it's like looks like an air water filter. You fill it up with water and hook it up to your nose, and it blows water through your nose and collects it. Like blow it up one nostril and collect another nostril and blows all the crud out. Now think about this. Everybody in here is wiping their butt after taking number 2, I hope. My mother didn't even got a bidet that washes their butt. And dries it. Got a hair dryer down there too. Kind of crazy. Everybody's breathing crap every day, and only Ashton's dad is washing his nose out. Kind of makes sense, right? You washed all that pollen out of your nose every day. And he swears by it. He really does. Okay, so I have people tell me it's wonderful. Huh?
And he has really bad sinuses and stuff, and so he started using it.
So I've been trying to medicate mine with Claritin D and stuff, right? Still I still wash my nose out. So basically it's a water hose. Now the only problem with the one I bought at Walgreens was fine. The cheap one is I don't like the sensation of drowning. Now some of y'all get into that. That's a whole other story, right? Like being choked. Okay, but basically choking on water is not one of my things. So when I do it, I mean you do blow it in your throat. At least I have a little trouble with it, right? But I tried it. But the Chinese make a little pot, like a teapot. You fill it up with boiled sterilized water, and you just pick it up and it blows through your nose and your mouth and your throat. You cough it out, spit it out. But that's a really cool one that you can buy at Walgreens to clean this out. Makes a lot of sense to me. And so it gets all the irritants out. But the problem is you have to do it about 2 weeks to see an effect. And most people, like me, went about a week and got tired of choking. But anyway, kind of a cool concept. Thank you, Ashton, for throwing that out there. That respiratory mucus membrane is what we're cleaning off. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium, making cilia, booger epithelium, right? Different parts of the larynx here. We got the epiglottis that goes down when we swallow, to close off the esophagus so that food air will go down the trachea. Trachea is in the front, esophagus is in the back. Okay, so we don't want to choke. Then we have the vocal cords here in the voice box, multiple cartilages here. Here's what your vocal cords look like right here. And so we can increase tension on that to blow, to make noises. Here is someone being incubated, right, where they put a breathing tube down in the throat there. Pretty painful. There's the vocal cords again. Nothing much I'm going to kind of skip through that. Where she gets excited about that. We already talked about that volume. Okay, here's the tracheal rings with the esophagus back behind it. They are C-shaped cartilages so that the cartilage won't push against the esophagus. Okay, cornea is the last one that makes a little heart shape there that branches down the primary bronchioli. Okay, smoker's cough. Let's just throw this out there. How many of y'all know you got a family who smoke? Anybody? Okay, you show me somebody smoke and they're 50, I show you somebody that's coughing. One of my coworkers that's been retired now a long time, we were driving to teach a night class one time, and he told me that he smoked for 30 years. So he started smoking at 15. He's like 45, 50-year-old, and said he'd get up in the morning and he'd have a cup of coffee and he'd cough for like 5 minutes. And he was smoking that cigarette coughing and it just hit him one day like an epiphany. That's killing me. He put the cigarette out and smoked a cigarette in 20 years. Willpower. I don't know how that kind of willpower. I'm telling you, me, I'm fat. He said about 5 months later, he's out there sunrise on his back porch, drinking a cup of coffee, wishing he had a cigarette, and he realized he wasn't coughing anymore. So if you smoke and you quit today and you live like 6 months, then your chances of getting lung cancer fall to somebody who never smoked. Okay? And your body your epithelium will regrow. So smoker's cough can be overcome if you'll just quit smoking. But this causes a lot of problem, and those irritants in the smoke lead to smoker's cough. Okay? And here's the bronchioli tree, right? Primary bronchus, secondary, tertiary, all the way down to these terminal bronchioli. Got a good picture coming up here. I love this. My favorite picture is like in every biology book. This is a human lung that they shot like latex down someone's dead lung and then rotted all the tissue off, all the alveoli off, just to show you all the plumbing. Okay? So all the tubes go down to these millions of alveoli. Let's look. And so look, there's the alveoli with the capillary bed over it, right? Let's see who remembers blood flow. So the pulmonary artery, pulmonary trunk carries oxygen to the lung that is what? It's an artery that has blue blood in there because it's unoxidated blood. So the blue ones here are the arteries coming in, and the red is the vein coming off. Then the pulmonary vein takes it back to the left atrium, and it's going to be bright red blood. So here's where we do that gas exchange with the CO2 leaving the blood and going into the air, and then the oxygen from the air into the blood. Now here's a cool question. I think it's a short answer question. Should have been. I think I left this one off. But what is the driving force for this? Because we think about ATP pumping stuff. Simple diffusion here, people. High to low. That's why you can't breathe water. They end up oxygen in the water moving toward into our body, right? It's going to go the other way because it's so little. So it's simple diffusion here at this respiratory membrane, which to me is really fascinating. Okay, there's the branching all the way down to the alveoli. Pretty wild. There's an electron microscope at 95 times power of a scanning electron microscope. And this is a slide we're going to look at. I'm going to go ahead and apologize. This week in lab, we got out of whack here. We didn't have anything due this week. I think there's like 2 or 3 modules due Sunday night, right? So you got a little time to catch up. I think there's a reproductive one and something else due Sunday night. But we're going to do reproduction this week, which is way ahead. I got to get ahead because once we get the cats out, there's not a cat chapter in this book. So we're going to go ahead and do reproduction, and then next week we'll do urinary. Okay, and then after that, I think we'll get the cats out and look at all the systems inside of a cat. So we're going to be dissecting the cat. And we're not going to meet actually the week of Easter. We're not going to meet that week after Easter because that's Monday. We get off Thursday. We get off next Friday. For Easter, we will have Labs on Friday and the next Monday. Okay. So we'll just have assignments that week after Easter. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit here. We do have some cells in here that make surfactant that prevents the collapsing of the lungs, alveoli, and we'll talk about that. That's one of my test questions. How we breathe, I want you to understand how we breathe, y'all can read that. I don't have time to cover that. So pulmonary ventilation involves the chest cavity coming up and out and the diaphragm down. That's the muscle. I'll probably go over that in lab when we do respiratory in a couple of weeks. But that's so the diaphragm pulls down, chest cavity comes up and out, and you create negative pressure in your lungs, just like pulling the plunger out of a syringe creates negative pressure, and that pulls the gases or drugs into the syringe. Actually, we better to turn it around because the diaphragm goes down. So if I'm going to do a syringe, I flipped it, but whatever. Atmospheric pressure is what's keeping me from dunking. 760 millimeters of pressure of the air holding me down. Now, just a quick thing that should be noted here. What that really means, what's this? I can get a pen here. Where's my pen? Please work real quick here. Pen, thank you. Okay, so what that means here is if you take a beaker of a glass plate of mercury and lay it out, and you put a 1 millimeter rod in here, then the air pressure will push down on the mercury. Somewhere I lay the pen. And that will cause the mercury to go up 760 millimeters. So we're measuring the air pressure pushes down and causes the mercury to go up the rise. What I'm trying to say. At sea level, the atmospheric pressure is 760 millimeters of mercury. When you climb up mountains, it gets lower or higher. Okay, lower, I think. Okay, so that can change, right? And that's why you have trouble breathing if you go out to Colorado or somewhere, right? A mile high. So that is the pressure at sea level. Okay, and so when we breathe, there's our chest cavity. Here's our lungs. We push diaphragm down, chest cavity out, and that lowers the pressure to 758 so that the air goes from high to low and fills up the lung. That's how we breathe. And that's kind of, to me, very cool. All right, let me go on. And I'm going to hit that real quick. They said I think it was a lot of detail on that. That's showing all that. Okay, and then we got, I love these. What's a yawn? What's a sneeze? Those are cool. We'll have time to cover those. I want to get to how we carry the carbon dioxide. I think there's that collapsed alveoli. Surfactant prevents water from collapsing our alveoli. So we make a chemical called surfactant that does that. Okay, then we're going to do a spirometer in a couple of weeks. We'll measure our vital capacity. These are the volumes that we can measure. And some of y'all may end up doing respiratory therapy up in Minnesota. Okay, but watch this. Let me get this. So we already know how we carry oxygen. Okay, but look at this. This carbon dioxide is really crazy. There's the exchange at the alveoli. And here is the exchange out in the body. Coming up here in just a second. So those are the numbers what you know from this is the tissue exchange. Okay, well, what's this? We get the CO2. Hemoglobin carries red blood cells, we know that. But check this out. I got it right here. It's coming up on one picture. So carbon dioxide is a problem. Here's how we do. We carry 20% bound to hemoglobin, 7 to 10% dissolved as gas, as Ashton noted. It has a better affinity. It dissolves in oxygen better in water. But 70% is this. And actually, I think it's the next equation. Well, here's the equation. We convert carbon dioxide and water into carbonic acid and break it down into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. And that is a solid that goes in solution. So we convert a gas into a solid that then goes in solution. Then we carry it to the lungs and do the reverse and breathe it out. Is that not the most brilliant thing ever? So God overcome this problem of how we carry CO2, carbon dioxide, by converting it into bicarbonate, and bicarbonate goes in solution. Then we reverse it when we get the lungs. So here's my last note, and I'll finish this chapter on a video. So what if I told you this to end on this? Guess what the number one buffer in your blood is to keep you from dying of rapid pH changes? Which, by the way, acidosis kills you, alkalosis kills you, right? Guess what the main buffer in the body is, in the blood? Bicarbonate. So look what it can do. It can release a hydrogen to lower the pH and become HCO3, or it can grab up a hydrogen and become H2CO3 and thereby raise the pH. I don't think that's a coincidence that the main buffer in your blood happens to be the way we carry carbon dioxide. It's a 2-for-1 special. It's like marrying the most good-looking guy in the world. I got a room full of girls, and he's really smart and makes lots of money and has a great personality too. So you won the lottery right then. You got somebody good-looking and smart who's got a good job. 2-for-1 special there. The main way we carry carbon dioxide is the main buffer in your blood. That's crazy cool. And I think that's a guy. I don't think that's a coincidence. All right, y'all have a good one. We'll stop there, and I'll do a video on the rest of it. Okay. Y'all have a good day. I think that's pretty.